Hey BookTube, I'm back for another video. Now this video is going to be about a book haul. So what is becoming a semi or biannual event that is basically marked on the calendars every single year for me is this local charity sale. It happens twice a year. It happens in April and then it happens also in September. Where a local mall of mine basically sets up tables everywhere and piles them with used books, sorted out by section, and for 3 days over the weekend, so Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they have the book sale, and it's just an enormous pile of books. The mall is quite big, and it's only one story, so through every hallway, there's always a table of books somewhere, and it's quite the event. And because I have zero self-control, when it comes to used books, it is basically a reader's delight because all the books are very cheap, and the books and the money all goes to a good place. So it's a wonderful time, and I always look forward to it ever since I started going maybe 2 years ago when it's continued post-COVID. So I've got an enormous pile of books. I'll not be able to do all of them in one video, obviously. Last time I did a huge book haul, I divided it into 3 sections. I think I did classics, I did nonfiction, and then I did contemporary fiction, all in separate videos. I think I'm gonna follow that same divide. But usually I do nonfiction or classics first. But this time I'm gonna shake it up and do my fiction finds first, my contemporary fiction finds, and that's because I found a lot of them, and I'm very excited with what I found. And there's a theme with my contemporary fiction finds, which if you watch that previous contemporary fiction video, or at least some of my contemporary, or if you notice, every time I find contemporary fiction, there's a theme with them, and that theme continues today, though I won't get into it right away, but you'll know what it is when I come to it. But first we're going to start off with the books that are either repeats or replacement copies, or just upgrades of what I already have, and authors that well, I'll describe it when I go into, because I have a lot of books to go into, and I want to make sure that it's relatively quick. I don't need an hour for each video, and because I could easily go on an hour for each of the sections that I've found. So let's get into the relatively contemporary fiction. I do include a little bit of 20th century fiction in there, and that's not really contemporary for me because I wasn't alive in the 20th century. Which fits with the very first book, which is a mass market book of this novel by Peter Matheson. It's At Play in the Fields of the Lord. I've heard of this author, and I've heard that he's considered one of the better authors of the 20th century. This is not the novel of his that I really want. I've not found it yet. I think it's called Tertuga, which is a highly experimental novel. I've been wanting to buy that novel for quite some time, but I have never found a used copy, and I've never pulled the trigger on buying it new online. So I think I'll give him a try with this novel here. I did actually see another novel by this author, but at that point I was all bookished out. I had bought way too many books, and buying one more book, it was a bit too much for me. So even I can get too much when it comes to used books. So at that point, I was okay with just finding the one novel and giving that one a try. This next book is a double, but it's an upgrade, and it's the stories of John Chver. But this is in a enlarged paperback, floppy paperback. And if you see on my bookshelves here, let's go here, right over here, I have a little mass market of this exact copy, but it's a mass market on one hand, so it's smaller print, and it's a little bit squatter, but then the spine is all cracked, because whoever owned it previously, I guess, quite enjoyed it. This one does not have that problem at all, and it's floppy and big. I've already decided that I've liked this author and his short stories, and so getting an upgrade was well in order. This is another repeat or a double. This is The Last Samurai by Helen DeWitt. I actually own another hardcover of this, and I also own a soft cover of this. And let me explain why that is. So, for one, this book is fairly expensive online. I've heard very many good things about this book, and it's considered one of the best books of the 20th or 21st century, even though this was published in 2000. And it's hard to find used online. And at one point, I came to the point where I really wanted this book. I have never found a used copy, so I bought a $20 hardcover used online, and that was the copy that I've had. I haven't read it yet, but I had it sitting on my shelf for a while, and then I went into a used bookstore in my local area and found a paperback for $2, and I couldn't turn that down even though I already had the hardcover. And then now I go to this huge charity sale and find another hardcover, which is even better than the one that I have, for even cheaper than the one I paid for online. So the one I paid for $20 online, it's the paper is all suntanned or it's quite yellow. I think it's a UK hardcover, but it's got the exact same yellow design as this one. Same with my paperback. They all have the yellow design, which is not my favorite design for this book. I've seen better designs for the book, but I'll take what I can get. And seeing this one there, how much did I pay for it? I paid $3 for this, so I was not going to turn that down. And I might, depending how I feel, I might actually do a giveaway of that previous hardcover, the one that I'll be replacing this one for, because this one's got deckled edges and it's nice and sturdy. And I like the paper feel of this one more than that other one, so I might do a giveaway of that one at some point, but we'll see. Then we move on to, which might be a bit of a theme sometimes, I'll point it out when it happens, but books where I have the ebook, but I found a paperback or hardcover of the book so cheap that I had to give in and buy the physical book as well. And this is one of those examples. This is Little Big by John Crowley. This is based, I think it's considered fantasy, or is it science fiction? No, science fiction, I think. But I know that this was one of the favorite books of Jordan Parsons here on BookTube, who recently made a return to BookTube, which is very good, because he was a great booktuber back in the day. And this was one of his favorite books, and this also one of his favorite authors. And I have the ebook of this, but I have not read it yet. And then I found this wonderful floppy paperback for $3. So I picked it up, and I'll give it a try. Then we have another example of a book I have an ebook of, but then I found a hardcover of it, and the cover here is absolutely wonderful. It's Arthur Rex by Thomas Berger, and the subtitle says here, a legendary novel, and it's his novel on King Arthur. This author wrote other novels that are quite different from this, but this is his King Arthur book, and I don't know if it would count as like fantasy or science fiction or just or whatever, but I would assume fantasy because it's King Arthur, and it's a retelling from the 20th century, so and it's in the shadow of The Sword and the Stone, by T.H. White, and this is a wonderful. It's a bit of a battered hardcover, at least the dust jacket is, but the cover there is just so great. I love that cover. It's wonderful. Who does the art here? Does it actually say? Well, tell me. Yeah, jacket painting by Jean Leon Hewins. So that's who does the cover painting, and that's just wonderful. Wonderful wonderful find, because I have the ebook of that book. I don't know if I mentioned that. I have the ebook, and the ebook does not have that cover, to put it lightly. So I'm not complaining about having doubles of that. And then this other book is another book where I have a squat mass market, but now I have the hardcover, and this is Joseph Heller's God Knows, and this is his historical, in air quotes, basically, because it's not really historical in that sense. It's more of a knowing comedy book about King David and his time, like the biblical King David. And it's a nice, wonderful hardcover. There's our author, actually. Just full picture, author picture on the back there of Joseph Heller. He's the author who's more well known for Catch-22, which I also have and I have not read, but I've heard good things about this novel too. So I'll have this replace that paperback. And then we come to more contemporary books. I'll start off with The Unbearable Lightness of Being by, was it Milan Kundera? And this is a bit of a booktube darling. A lot of people on booktube have read this and really liked it, including a Book Olive, who in one of her older videos where she talks about books that she read previous to booktube and that she loves. This was one of those books that was on that list for her fiction, and she explicitly said that this is not constructed as a traditional novel in the sense that the characters are characters that are characters in themselves, or they have their own motivations and whatever. It's more of a philosophy book dressed up as a novel. So the characters are stand-ins for what the author wants them to be, for different ideas and whatnot. And a lot of people on booktube seem to really like this novel, and I do have some hesitations about that, but if a Book Olive really loves this book and she sees it for what it is, then, because I think she said there was a lot of wisdom in this book, or she really liked the author's ideas presented in this book. I can't quite remember, but yeah, I want to give it a try. And we got another full page, or back cover of the author here, and he looks quite unhappy. So let's hope the book doesn't make me unhappy. And then we have 2 more books until we get to the major theme. The major theme hasn't really started yet. And the first one here is a Shirley Hazard novel. This is from 2003. This is The Great Fire, but the cover, for some reason, makes the decision to put the title all the way from the back to the front. So then when you look at it from the front, you only get Eat Fire instead of The Great Fire. I wonder if, I assume that's intentional. Maybe Eat Fire is some kind of reference to something in the book or whatever. And it says it was a National Book Award winner, which is an interesting thing for me, because it sounds like Shirley Hazard was similar to the novelist Marilynne Robinson, where they each published novels, or at least in Marilynne Robinson's case, a novel that had critical acclaim in like the 70s or 80s, and almost won a book prize, never quite did. And then after a long period of not publishing a novel, they, in the early 2000s, they each came out with another novel which won separate book prizes. So for Shirley Hazard, her classic in the 20th century is, was it The Transit of Venus or something like that? It's an In a Penguin classic. But then she came out with this novel, which went in 2003, and it won a book prize. And then we got Marilynne Robinson, who had Housekeeping in the 80s, which was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize but didn't win. And then in, I think, 2005, she won the Pulitzer Prize for Gilead. And so I find that fascinating, where authors have a book or books or a career at one point or one stage, and then years or decades later they publish another novel that does quite well and gets a lot of acclaim. And I think that's the case with Shirley Hazard here. And then with Shirley Hazard, I've been reading her collected short stories, and they've been absolutely magnificent. The way she explores human relationships, especially from the female perspective, is really, really enlightening and quite fascinating. So I love her short stories. I know I love her short stories already, so I want to try out her novels. So, and this is a great cover, great color design, regardless of what you think about the title being stretched out like that. But a great addition there. And then now I'm going to talk about the theme. The theme that for the rest of the books, because that's only the beginning book too. You don't know what you're getting into. I have, 3 more stacks of contemporary fiction books here, which are a lot more contemporary because they're from 1990 onward. And the theme is the world famous book reviewer who did his famous top 10 fiction lists from 1990 all the way up to the current present day. So right now it's up to 2024. And there's the best of fiction list for every single year up to now. And that has dictated a lot of my fiction or contemporary fiction buying. And all these books are on that list, except for this one here. And this is The Case of Exploding Mangoes by Mohammed Hanif. And this book is an adjacent book because I believe his next book after this, what is it, like Red Sea or something like that? I can't quite remember the title. That did make the list, but this one didn't. But I've heard other people talk about this book, and so I want to give this one a try. But I also want to read this author's other book too. So this is the adjacent recommendation. But then we get into the actual theme of books that are recommended by the world famous book reviewer. And I'm going to do what I did in a previous video, a contemporary fiction book haul, where I actually read the comments from the world famous book reviewer on the book in question. So we start off in 1991 and 1992, and they are part of the Rumple of the Bailey series by John Mortimer. This is the third Rumple omnibus. I also found the second Rumple omnibus, but this is too old to make the list. I have the first Rumple omnibus at home already, so I found the second and the third Rumple omnibus. But it's the third Rumple omnibus that makes it into our 1990s time frame, where this has Rumple a la carte and Rumple on trial. And Rumple a la carte makes it in the 1991 best of fiction list, and this is what the world famous book reviewer has to say. 6 classic stories start off the year's fiction bests. The sparkling connection contains some real gems, including Rumple of the Summer and the Summer of Discontent, the title story in which our hero defends an arrogant celebrity chef, and the highlight of the collection, Rumple of the Persecution. And that's the first collection of short stories in this volume here. And you can see it listed here, and then there's our author. And then we move on to 1992 with Rumple on Trial, which is the second book collected in this omnibus. This is Rumple on Trial by John Mortimer. Although he very much wanted to give the impression that his beloved Rumple of the Bailey stories were as natural and unchanging as P.G. Wodehouse's Jeeves and Wooster stories, the truth is that John Mortimer improved as a writer over time, and the stories in this collection amply demonstrate that fact, especially Rumple and the Miscarriage of Justice, and the wonderful title story. So this is the third Rumple omnibus. This is the second Rumple omnibus, and then I have the first one at home. So I have all 3. I think that's it for Rumple of the Bailey. I'm not entirely sure, but that's more than enough for me. 3 big volumes. Then we move on to 1993. And 1993 has 3 books on it that I have found. The first one here is Birdsong by Sebastian Faulks. And nice little addition here. This is what the world famous book reviewer has to say. This archetype World War I novel, the naive young man, the torrid love affair, the grit and gore of the front, the chilling descriptions of no man's land, actually made me sigh a bit when I first got it, since, to put it mildly, I've read such novels before. But I was immediately impressed by the job Fawkes does here, especially in crafting his characters. So that's praise for Birdsong by Sebastian Fawkes. And then we continue in 1993 with The Blue Afternoon by William Boyd. This is a very nice hardcover here. And the description for this one is, I was familiar with Boyd's peculiarities as a writer before I came to this book. But even by his own standards, this is one strange novel, equal parts the story of a young woman in Golden Age Hollywood, and a shaggy dog adventure story running over half the map, from Portugal to Manila at the turn of the 20th century. Boyd's plotting is much more meticulous than it looks, and he makes the whole thing work in ways I didn't expect. But the real draw here, as in all his books, is the understated lovely intelligence of his prose. That's some good praise by the world-famous book reviewer. And then we have one of my favorite finds, actually, and this would be one of the double finds. I have this as an ebook, but if I find a hardcover, I'm not going to turn it down. This is Body and Soul by Frank Conroy. And then the description for this one is, I'm sure I wasn't the only person who eventually became convinced this book would never actually get written, but lo and behold, here it was, and blindingly good. The best novel of the year. This is the story of a young piano prodigy, his troubled mother, his steadfast teacher, and the steadily broadening scope of his adult life. And it's better than anything Conroy has ever written before, and the characters live. Here's the author photo here. I like the design with the purple and black. That's Body and Soul. And then we move to the 1994, and this is the last book of the 90s. This is Felicias Journey by William Chver. And the description here is, to put it mildly, I had a hit-or-miss relationship with this author, especially when it came to his novels. But the slim story of a poor, pregnant Irish girl who falls into the orbit of a fascinatingly eccentric Englishman struck me right off as more plotted and controlled than great chunks of what I've read from Chver, and there are scenes in the book's tense climax that stick with me still. And it's a very short book. And also, there's a little blurb by Publishers Weekly here that says, a thriller lifted to the level of high art. So we'll see if that's the case. Then we move on to the 2000s. We start off in the year 2000, which has 3 books on this list that I found. Starting off with The Amazing Adventures of Cavalere and Clay by Michael Chabon. And as you see, there's a Pulitzer Prize sticker there. But this is the description for this book. This exuberant fictional embellishment of the archetype comic book origin story, 2 oddball boys combining talents they didn't even know that they had in order to create superheroes and supervillains in the era of the Second World War, be the pair Joe Siegel and Jerry Schuster, or Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, although in this case leaning quite a bit more towards the latter, is so intensely winning and such a perfect mixture of tenderness and wonder that it swept away my initial reluctance right away. It thoroughly deserves its status as a modern classic. And I like the intentional part on the author, or on the publisher, to make the book feel like it's a battered old copy. As you can see with all the lines here, this is all smooth and whatnot, but it looks like it's been wrinkled and well read. So very nice. I actually found, I bought this on the first day. I went Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because I'm insane. And on Friday, this was the only copy they had there. But on Saturday, when I went again, they actually had a few more copies of this in there, and including a signed copy, which had a little sticker that said signed by the author. And I looked into it, and of course it was signed by the author, but I'm not really into that kind of thing, so I was perfectly willing to let someone else delight in the ink scribbles of the author in the book. So then we move on to the second book from 2000, the year 2000, and this is The Map of Love by Adaf Suif, and nice cover image there, and it says the description for this book. I jumped into this novel by Suif because I loved her debut novel, In the Eye of the Sun. And just to butt in here, In the Eye of the Sun was also on the world-famous book reviewers lists, and I've been looking for that book for a while, but I did not find it this time. I found this one instead. And continuing here, and if anything, the second novel was even more impressive. It tells the parallel stories of two women dealing in their different yet similar ways with colonialism, ethnic identity, and love. One of these women is an English woman in 1901 who falls in love with an Egyptian man, and the other one is one of that woman's descendants a century later who falls in love with an Egyptian-American man. And although the neatness with which Suif dovetails the two stories is predictable, there are two moments in particular in the novel's climax that take advantage of every scrap of power such a dual arrangement can make possible. So that's The Map of Love by Adaf Suif. And then we stayed in 2000 with the last book from 2000 here on the list. This is English Passengers by Matthew Neal. I think that's how you say the last name. Kneale. English Passengers, and then it says it's a Booker Prize finalist that year. The description for this book is: It took me a while to grow to love this antic historical novel about a small-time English privateer in 1857 who's forced to take on paying passengers, one of whom turns out to be a harmless crank intent on sailing to the exact location of the Garden of Eden, and the other of whom doesn't turn out to be quite so harmless. Neal broadens his story and complicates it with a great many more subplots and dozens of well-realized characters, and once I finally loved this novel, I loved it very much. So, decent praise. I also like the spine here, which looks very much like it's overlaid on a map, so it looks like the spines of the landmark classic books, so landmark Thucydides, the landmark Herodotus. That's what that reminds me of, even though the back doesn't have any of that map stuff, nor the front, so it's just on the spine here. Then we move on to 2001. With The Glass Palace by Amitav Ghosh. A nice hardcover here that wraps all the way around. The description for this one is this story of an Indian boy named Raj Kumar, whose life is upended in 1885, the year the British invade Burma and dispose its royal family. Raj Kumar catches a glimpse of a royal servant named Dolly, and the thought of her haunts him throughout the ensuing years of his life as he rises to power and wealth in the teak industry. Ghosh takes this already sprawling story and doubles and redoubles it in complexity and human breadth until the story feels like a vivid dream. So, some good praise there for this novel. Then we move on to 2002, and this was probably one of my favorite fictional finds of the whole sale. This is Gold's Book of Fish by Richard Flanagan. Gold's Book of Fish by Richard Flanagan. And if you can't tell, this book is very different. Let's see. The Case of Exploding, very different in its style. So it's taller and a little bit narrower than... Oh no, it's about the same size this way, but then it's taller up front. So it's got a bit of a weird book design to it, and then it's got French flaps here, and then the book design goes all the way throughout here with the little fish and sea creatures. So the description for this one, which is in 2002, when I first started this novel, I was certain its postmodern / magical realism affectations would alienate me almost immediately, since those things are almost always crutches for weak writers. But all such games take a distant backseat in these pages to a strange tale told strangely, the story of a convict sent to a 19th century Tasmanian prison colony who uses his anatomical drawings of fish to fashion an entire language, mute but powerful, of freedom. I regularly admonished readers for gravitating towards novels as video games, and I admonished some customers for misusing this book in that way, but I kept recommending it too. So some very interesting praise for this novel, and the whole premise of this book does certainly fascinate me. So we'll see how this book turns out. And then we move on to 2004 with I Am Charlotte Simmons by Tom Wolfe. And I just noticed that the title is not actually on the front page. We just got Tom Wolfe. And then we got a setback here with the title. As you see the dress here, it's cut out. So then when you open it, we got the title, I Am Charlotte Simmons. And it's a very handsome paperback. And before I read the blurb here, I want to say that I've known that this was on the list, but I've been hesitant to buy it because I've seen this in hardcover, and I don't like the 90s look of the hardcover, and I sort of passed it by before. But getting this very stately, dark design with the clean, I like the contrast between the dark and the green here. And then even the setback here is pretty cool. So finding this design is what tipped the scales for me to buying this, because the premise, to put it mildly, is not something I'm as sold on, but I'll give it a try because the world famous book reviewer recommends it. So let's read what he has to say. Once you're a fan of any author, you really have to be more cautious with each succeeding novel, not less. Your affection for past stories will naturally tempt you to forgive things you ought not to in more recent works. This novel, the college years coming of age of a young girl from the sticks, is a good case in point. Despite Wolfe's usual care and linguistic virtuosity, there are spots where the whole thing creaks just a bit. Not many spots, however, and not nearly bad enough to distract from Wolfe's acidic portrait of the brain-dead experience of the undergraduate years, a wasteland perfectly suited to his gifts. As you can see, that whole idea of the brain-dead experience of undergraduate years really doesn't appeal to me, because my undergraduate years were anything but brain-dead. Anyways, moving on to 2005. 2005 has quite a bit going for it, with 4 books I found from the 2005 years list. And we start off with The March by E.L. Doctorow, and the description for this one is a historical novel, this one set in the American Civil War and centering on the Union General Sherman's march to the sea, a campaign Doctorow researched extensively and writes about here as a kind of protracted violent dream. Doctorow specializes in creating galleries of vivid characters, and he does it brilliantly in this novel, giving us dramatic viewpoints from the entire spectrum of the march. So it's a slimmer thing than some of the other books on this list, but here's The March. Then we get into the next book on our 2005 list. This is The Sea by John Banville. And just before I read the description here, for one, this says the winner of the Booker Prize. But number 2, I found there was a couple of hardcovers of this same book at the sale, and but I loved the feel of this paperback a lot better because it's got a much nicer cover to it, and I like the color scheme better. So this, and it's also quite short, but yeah. So I chose the paperback over the hardcover. Well, as you see with some of my other books, I went with the hardcover. So the description for this book, The Sea by John Banville, this author is usually too buttoned up for my tastes, but that very quickly works supremely to strengthen this novel about a middle-aged man named Max, who's returned to the seaside town where he spent many summers as a boy. He's retreated to this place out of wild grief for losing his wife, and in this isolated spot he relives his memories and, almost against his will, starts to make contact with other people, make connections about his own past, and gradually think about healing. It's a very soft-spoken, very sad novel, the best thing Banville's ever written. And then, also in 2005, we have Arthur and George by Julian Barnes, and the description for this one is, This author is, no, here it is. Barnes here takes the premise of a straightforward historical novel, the friendship that develops between Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and a rural vicar, and slowly and inventively complicates it with plots spun from Doyle's famous struggles with his most famous fictional creation and the trials faced by the mixed-race vicar, George Adelgi, in the small village he calls home. I don't know quite why I found this novel so much more palatable than all the other fiction Barnes has written, but I very much did. I recommend and reread it when I'm not at all tempted to do either of those things with, for instance, Flaubert's Parrot. So here is Arthur and George by Julian Barnes. And then we come to the last book of 2005. This is A Short History of Tractors in Ukraine by Maria Lewicka. I'm butchering that. And a side note before I read the description for this novel, I found this has a usual cover to it that I've seen a couple of times, but I've never actually picked it up. Not least because the title doesn't exactly inspire or suggest that it'll be a good read. So maybe I'm a bit judging a book by its cover, even though it's been recommended by a world-famous book reviewer. But this one tipped the scales for me because this is a UK trade paperback, and it's got that papery feel to it. And look at that cover. Look at that design. It's very attractive. It's very much different from the American and the Canadian edition. So obviously I was going to pick this one up, and here's the description for this novel. This extremely assured debut has a comedic premise. A retired widower from Ukraine becomes sexually infatuated with a bosom young woman, swears he's in love, and begins lavishing her with presents, and thereby unites his two daughters, who attempt to put aside their mutual dislike in order to save their father from himself. But although Lewicka displays some genuine comedic ability in these pages, she steadily shades the story darker and darker as it develops. A very satisfying first novel. And then we move on from 2005. We jump all the way to 2011, but this book isn't actually on that list. This is an adjacent recommendation based off the author. So let me read the description here. So in 2011, the famous book reviewer puts The Illumination by Kevin Brockmeyer onto the list. I did not find this novel, though I very much want to. And here's the description for that list. This author's previous book, The Brief History of the Dead, is one of those novels that sticks with you long after you finish it. In my case, this now often manifested as a wish that I reviewed it. And The Illumination is even stronger, an incredibly lyrical examination of the tenuousness of attachment, all done up in prose that's at times so beautiful you wonder how he does it. So I didn't find The Illumination, but the famous book reviewer mentions the author's previous book, A Brief History of the Dead, which I found in this nice hardcover. And if you see, it's a very striking cover image because we got a coat on a hanger, but then there's hands just pulling it aside. And then we've got the title cleverly inserted into the middle there. So, Brief History of the Dead. And so this is an author adjacent recommendation, similar to the case of Exploding Mangoes. And then we have two more books, fiction books, which is good because I'm already at 40 minutes here. But I'll mention that this novel here from 2013 is definitely the find of the day when it comes to contemporary fiction. So for this video, this is definitely the find of the day. And this is Look Away, Look Away by Wilton Bernhard. And this is a novel. I've been looking for a novel by this author for quite some time, especially the previous novel, or at least one of the other novels that this author has written called Gospel. But I'll read the description and then I'll talk about it a bit. There's been times over the years when I've thought I might be Wilton Bernhard's only faithful fan, Certainly, I often felt like the only fan of his huge historical novel, Gospel. I've actually never met another person who's even so much as finished it. So the appearance of this hugely entertaining, deep-fried Southern comedy of a book utterly delighted me, not only in its own right, virtually every scene is perfect, right down to the hilarious drink-swelling family confrontation set piece at the climax, but because I felt certain it would do what it in fact has done, draw a lot more attention to this fantastic writer. And this, as you can see, it's kind of clever book design there. You got a zipper zipping either up or down, depending on your perspective here. But it sounds very interesting because it's like a family drama, but very distinctly Southern family drama. I think this would be an interesting contrast to read with Jonathan Franzen's The Corrections, which does not make the famous book reviewers lists because the famous book reviewer is not a very big fan of Jonathan Franzen to begin with. But that book is famous in other extended booktube circles, and I do have a hardcover of it that's been sitting on my shelf for quite a while. And to read and contrast a couple of books that center around family dramas sounds very interesting, and to see what each author does with the story. And obviously this one seems to take a more comedic approach, which I think Jonathan Franzen is which he very much does not take. And then we come to the last novel on my contemporary fiction list for this video. This is from 2017. This is Lincoln on the Bardo by George Saunders, and this is another example of where I have the ebook. So I have the ebook of this, but I didn't realize that this has a very strange formatting to it. The formatting is very different from usual novels, as you can see here. So very, very different formatting, and I don't know how well that will work in an ebook. So I've always wanted a physical copy, and now I have the hardcover. And here's the blurb for this novel. This thrillingly ambitious debut novel by Saunders about a grieving President Lincoln in a graveyard full of spirits who don't quite understand why they should be grieved isn't just a virtuoso feat of sustained genre blending. It's also the most convincingly strange novel of the year in any genre. So that's the praise for George Saunders' Lincoln on the Bardo. I believe that won the Pulitzer Prize that year, so I don't think anyone needs... Actually, now that I think about it, this one doesn't have a bestseller or Pulitzer Prize sticker, so is this a first edition? Let's see. Doesn't look like it, based on the copyright page. But it wouldn't really matter anyways, because I just want to read it and enjoy it. So that's it for this list. I'll be filming the other major videos, and I'll be posting them as I can. Not all at once, of course, because you need to enjoy my videos first before you can get any more of them. You got to work for them. So that's it for this list. Thanks, BookTube, and I hope you have a good reading day or reading week.